Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Rachel Horrocks-Birss from the Academic Skills Centre at the University of Dundee, and today I'd like to talk to you about secondary referencing. Now, secondary referencing is something that confuses a lot of people, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually really simple. So let's work through the steps. So first off, what is secondary referencing? It's a term that may not be familiar to many people, but it's something that we often end up doing in our academic careers. So first off, imagine that you're reading an article by Smith, say. You're just reading this article, as one does researching an essay. Then in that article, Smith quotes someone else, quotes Jones, say. So you're reading this article by Smith, they have a quote from someone else, and you really like that quote. So say that quote by Jones in Smith's essay is so good that you want to use it in your essay. You found this quote, you really want to use it. The big question is, how do you use it? How do you take that quote that you read in some other article and use it in your essay? This is kind of the process of secondary referencing, and that's what we'll talk about in the rest of this video. So first step is to find the article if you at all can. So if you're going to cite Jones's article in your essay, you need to do as much as you can to try and find Jones's article itself. It's not enough to say, oh, I read that one sentence from Jones's article in Smith's article, and I'm going to quote that, and that's how I'm going to leave it. You need to put a lot of effort into trying to find the original Jones's article. So the best way to start this is to go look in Smith's reference list, find Jones's article. The full publication information should be there, so the journal, the page numbers, perhaps even a link. So go look, find that publication information in Smith's reference list, and then go to the library website and do a search to find Jones's article. Hopefully, if you type in Jones's name and the article title, potentially the journal title, that sort of thing, hopefully it should just pop up. And then you can read all of Jones's article, read it for yourself, make sure that it says what Smith was saying it says, and then you can quote it directly. So that if you're reading an article, it quotes someone else, and you really want to use that quote, the best thing to do, go find the original article, read it for yourself, and use it like that. That's the absolute best thing to do. Of course, sometimes there might be problems with that. Sometimes you might type the information into the library search and it doesn't pop up. So what do you do then? There's a few other things you can try. So first off, try Google. Sometimes simply typing in the full reference from Smith's article, like for Jones's article, can pop up, let's say, a PDF of the source or a link to the source somewhere. So sometimes even if the library website's being a little fiddly, you can still find it on Google. So I'd highly suggest doing that with Google. If Google doesn't work and the library website doesn't work, then go and ask a librarian for help. This is the librarian's job. They love helping you, and librarians really enjoy puzzles. And so if you have a source that you just can't find, go and ask them. And chances are, between Google and the expertise of the librarians, you will be able to find a copy of the article after all. So that's the best thing to do. As I said before, if you find this quote that you really want to use, go find the original source, even if it takes a little bit more digging, even if you need to use some alternative search engines, even if you need to ask the librarian. That is the best thing to do. The thing is, sometimes you still can't find it, or maybe perhaps you don't have time. Ideally, you would have started your essay early enough that you have time to go through this whole process. But if you just can't find the article, perhaps it needs to have an interlibrary loan from somewhere else, and that would take too long, or the university can't do that for you at the moment. Then we can turn to secondary referencing. So secondary referencing is basically where you reference the article that you read about in one article. So you're referencing Jones, which you read about in Smith, but you have to make it clear in your citation that you are indeed referencing an article that you only read about in someone else's article. You haven't read the article itself. This is about being honest academically and making sure that it's clear that like what you've read and what you haven't read, because it's not fair to just cite the Jones article directly since you haven't actually read it yourself. So what does a secondary reference look like? Let's take a look. I've got a few examples here. So in this case, we have studies show penguins are more intelligent than puffins. Then Jones, 2017, quoted in Smith, 2018. So you have the reference for the Jones article, the one you're citing, Jones 2017, sorry. But then you make it clear that you actually only read the quote in Smith's article. So you say quoted in Smith 2018. Another very similar example here. So Jones 2017, quoted in Smith 2018, demonstrates that penguins are more intelligent than puffins. So it's really not that difficult. You just need the author's last name and the year, and then the author's last name and the year of the article that you actually read. Just say quoted in, there you go. It can go at the beginning of the sentence, at the end of the sentence, either is fine, as long as you include the basic publication information for both sources, just author and year, and as long as you include those words like quoted in, that's good secondary referencing. That makes it very clear to your reader that you are using an idea from Jones, but that you have indeed just read the Smith article and they cited the Jones article. So it's all very clear and correct. That's how you do it. So now we've figured out how to do the citation, there's one thing left to look at, and that's the reference list at the end of your essay. So what do you do with your reference list? Do you include Smith and Jones, or just Smith, or just Jones? What do you put in your reference list? So a good rule of thumb for your reference list is that you shouldn't include sources that you haven't read. So in this case, you should include Smith because you have read the Smith article, but you shouldn't include the Jones article because you haven't actually read it. So if you haven't been able to find Jones in the original, then what you should do is just put the Smith article in the reference list, but don't put the Jones article. This will be clear to your markers because of the secondary referencing you did earlier, where you said Jones quoted in Smith. So that means that your marker knows that if they want to go find that quote, what they need to do is go to the Smith article and not the Jones one. So yes, in this case, if you have secondary referenced, if you weren't able to find that original article that you wanted, then you should include the article you actually read and not include the article that you weren't able to find. So just a little thing to remember about your reference lists. Don't include both, just include the one you actually read. All right, and that's it. Secondary referencing is something that maybe sounds a little complicated, but it's actually really simple once you get the hang of it. So remember, when you read a quote in an article and you want to find that, you want to use that quote, try and find the original article first, do everything you can to find it. And if you aren't able to find it, then you can secondary reference using the instructions in this video. If you have any questions about this, feel free to email us at ask@dundee.ac.uk and we'll get back to you. Good luck.